This podcast is sponsored by Skylight Frame. Mother's Day is almost here. What are you getting her? Something that shows you care. Something that makes her feel loved. Something that won't stress you out. Something like the Skylight Frame. The Skylight Frame is the perfect gift. It's a touchscreen photo frame your whole family can upload photos to, from wherever they are in the world. It's a way to share with her all the moments that matter. It sets up in seconds. You can even make sure that it's already loaded with photos when your mom opens her Mother's Day gift. And her Skylight Frame can hold thousands of the treasured photos you share. It's an easy, heartfelt way for mom to stay connected with those who matter most. It really is the perfect gift. Now, as a special Mother's Day offer for our listeners, get 15% off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/easy. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/easy. Get 15% off your Mother's Day purchase now at skylightframe.com/easy.
Hello, and welcome back to the Curious Kid Podcast. Wait until you hear what we're getting curious about this week. Mailbag! Dear Olivia and Jacob, my name is Ash and I live in Colorado. I am 5 years old and I'm curious about ravens and octopuses. I also want to know about ears and how people hear. And I love your podcast. We listen to it on road trips. Actually, I want to learn about car batteries too. We are on a road trip right now and our battery died. Luckily, someone with a portable car battery helped us by giving it a jump start. Thank you so much, Ash and his mom Kim from Boulder, Colorado.
Wow, what a great email. So many wonderful suggestions or topics to get curious about. This week, we are getting curious about ears for Ash.
The human body is so amazing, and there aren't many parts of the body that I think are as fascinating as ears. Our ears are important in allowing us to hear the world around us, but it turns out that our ears serve other important purposes as well. Stick around to learn lots about our ears with the help of a very special guest. If you listened to last week's episode on coding, you know that there were a lot of hard words in that episode that may be new to a lot of our listeners, like algorithm and decomposition. Well, if you think those words are hard, wait until you hear what job our special guest this week has. His name is Ryan, and he's a pediatric otolaryngologist. We're going to break down what that means in just a couple of minutes. Before we get there, why don't you tell us the question of the week?
The question of the week is, which of the following sounds is the loudest according to the American Academy of Audiology? Car horns, blenders, fireworks, or vacuums?
All of those sounds are dangerous if exposed to them for long enough, but one of those sounds is so loud that hearing protection is recommended whenever the sound is heard because it is so loud.
The ear has 3 different sections, and their names totally make sense. The outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear.
The outer ear is the portion of the ear that is easily visible. The part of the ear that people usually identify as being an ear is called the pinna. It can also be called an auricle.
The pinna is made of cartilage covered by skin, just like the nose.
The pinna acts like a funnel, and it funnels different sounds and sends them into the ear canal.
The ear canal is the part of your outer ear where earwax likes to hang out.
Earwax also has a fancy medical name, which is cerumen. Earwax is made in the ear canal, and believe it or not, earwax is healthy and very important.
First, earwax keeps the ear canal moist, preventing the ear from becoming too dry. Second, it works really well in preventing infections. And third, it blocks harmful things from getting in the delicate eardrum.
The eardrum, which also goes by the fancy name tympanic membrane, is a membrane that stretches across the ear canal. It separates the outer ear from the middle ear.
It's helpful to think of an eardrum as a drum, like the instrument. You hit the drum with a drumstick, and it makes a sound.
That's a great way to think about it. Thankfully, no drumsticks hit our eardrums. The way our ears work is that sounds travel through our ear canals and hit our eardrums, making them move. The moving of the eardrums leads to vibrations in the middle ear.
The parts of our middle ear that vibrate are 3 teeny tiny bones that are located there. They are the only 3 bones in the entire ear. The names of those bones are the hammer, anvil, and stirrup.
They have those names because the bones actually resemble a hammer, anvil, and stirrup. Like other parts of the ear we've already discussed, the 3 bones in the middle ear also have medical names. The hammer is called the malleus, the anvil is called the incus, and the stirrup is called the stapes.
The stapes is the smallest bone in the body. It's super duper tiny.
Get ready for the craziest fact of the episode. The 3 bones in the middle ear, the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, are so small that all 3 bones could fit inside a single penny.
That's insane. Now that we've learned all about the outer and middle ear, we should mention that it's really important for the pressure on both sides of our eardrums to be equal. If the pressure on both sides isn't equal, we aren't going to be able to hear things just right.
Here's an example many of you might be familiar with. If you've ever experienced a rapid rise or drop in elevation, like you would on an airplane, you may know exactly what happens when the pressure inside the ear is larger than the pressure on the outside. The eardrum swells outward. While the eardrum is swollen, it can't vibrate, making it very hard to hear things properly. The sensation can be a bit uncomfortable, and sometimes even painful. It doesn't last long. Eventually, you will experience a popping feeling as your ears adjust to normal pressure on both sides. There is a tube called the eustachian tube that connects the middle ear to the back of the nose. The eustachian tube helps keep the pressure on both sides of the eardrum balanced.
If you think the outer ear and middle ear are interesting, and they totally are, wait until you learn more about the inner ear.
The inner ear is made up of the cochlea and the semicircular canals.
The word cochlea comes from Greek and means snail. It has that name because it has a coil shaped like a snail.
When the stapes of the middle ear vibrates, it makes fluid in the cochlea move around. The fluid that moves around stimulates tiny hair cells inside the cochlea. Different hair cells will be stimulated to respond to different sounds, and that's incredible.
What happens next might be even more amazing. When a hair cell detects the frequency and pitch of a sound, it makes a nerve impulse that travels through a nerve called the cochlear nerve.
The cochlear nerve also goes by the name auditory nerve. From there, the impulses travel to the brain where they are turned into meaningful sounds.
The other important part of the inner ear, the semicircular canals, are very important for balance. The canals are filled with fluid and also have hairs lining their walls.
When you move your head, the fluid in the semicircular canals moves around and contacts the hairs that line the canal walls. Those hairs send signals to the brain to identify your position. The brain then sends messages to your muscles to help make sure you are balanced. Have you ever been on a ride at an amusement park, like the teacups, for example?
Yes, I love riding in teacups. I try to make them spin around as fast as possible.
You sure do. So you're probably familiar with the sensation I'm about to point out. Do you know the feeling when the teacups stop, but you still feel like you're spinning?
I do. It's not the greatest feeling.
I agree. And the reason you get that feeling is because the fluid in your semicircular canals is still sloshing around for a little bit, even after you stop. The same thing would happen if you have a cup of water and you shake it up. The water isn't going to get still the second you stop shaking the cup. It will take a few seconds to settle. The same thing goes for the fluid in the semicircular canals. It takes a few seconds for the fluid to settle, even after the teacups stop, which is why you may still feel like you're moving after the ride is over. Now that we've learned a lot about the parts of the ear and how they work, let's answer the question of the week. But don't go anywhere after we reveal the answer, because a super interesting interview with a pediatric otolaryngologist is just around the corner. Olivia, which of the following sounds is the loudest according to the American Academy of Audiology? Car horns, blenders, fireworks, or vacuums?
The loudest of those four sounds is fireworks. They are so loud that they should never be experienced without hearing protection.
That's right. The same thing goes for car stereos at full volume and jackhammers. Those sounds are very, very loud and should never be experienced without protection. We are so lucky to have a special guest with us that is going to help us learn so much more. His name is Ryan, and he is a pediatric otolaryngologist. What in the world is that? Well, an otolaryngologist is a doctor that specializes in treating the ear, nose, and throat. And Ryan is a pediatric otolaryngologist, which means he treats the ears, noses, and throats of children. I can't wait to learn more from Ryan. Take it away, Olivia.
Ryan, thank you so much for being a guest on the Curious Kid podcast. Why did you decide to become a pediatric otolaryngologist? Why did you decide to become a pediatric otolaryngologist?
Well, first of all, Olivia and Jacob, I just wanted to say that as a longtime fan of the Curious Kids podcast, it's truly an honor to be on. So thank you for having me. Why do I want to be a pediatric otolaryngologist? I'd say two main reasons. One, I really just love working with kids. It just, kids brighten my day. I feel like helping kids with problems is just, a little bit more special than anything else one could do. So, that just makes me a lot happier on a daily basis to be working with kids. But two, we really just get to do a lot of cool stuff as pediatric otolaryngologists. We treat ear, nose, and throat problems. So that means sometimes we're helping kids hear better, or sleep better, or eat better, or sometimes even breathe better. And obviously, these are a lot of things that are really important to people every day of their life. And there's a lot of cool procedures and surgeries that we get to do to help people with these problems. Oftentimes I'll be using microscopes or telescopes or drills or even lasers to help people with these problems. And one of my favorite things to do is airway surgery, which helps people breathe better when they're not breathing well, which can really change their life. So I think that's pretty cool.
Why do kids get ear infections more frequently than adults?
You're right. Kids do get ear infections much more often than adults. The main reason for this is that something called the eustachian tube is different in kids and adults. The eustachian tube is a little tube that connects your ear to the back of your nose, almost in your throat. And that tube is what helps regulate pressure in the ears and prevent fluid from accumulating in the ears. When fluid accumulates in the ears, you can get infections. This eustachian tube is not as fully developed in young kids as it is in adults. Usually in the first couple years of life, when kids are 1 or 2 years old, that tube is not working great for a lot of kids, and it takes time to develop. So when that tube's not working great, kids get ear infections. So sometimes kids need to just go on antibiotics for ear infections, and sometimes they end up seeing me if they get so many that they need ear tubes placed. Ear tubes go into the eardrum, and they're tiny, tiny things. They're about 3 millimeters big, about the size of an ant. And I put them in with a microscope, and usually that fixes kids' problems with ear infections and fluid. So that's probably the most frequent thing I do.
Is cleaning your ears with Q-tips safe?
That's a great question, and one of the questions I get most often in my office. Cleaning your ears with Q-tips is really not a great idea, even though a lot of people do it anyway. Usually when you're using a Q-tip, you might get some wax out of your ears from the side of the Q-tip, but the tip of the Q-tip pushes it deeper in the ear. And sometimes we see people with earwax that's packed down against their eardrum and they can't hear, and then they have to come see us in the office and get it removed. Most ears are actually self-cleaning. So if you leave them alone, the wax will kind of gradually move out of the ear canal and fall out on its own. For some people, this doesn't work as well as others, and they need to use certain methods to get it out. Oftentimes, they'll see an ENT doctor and have their ears either suctioned out or cleaned out with a curette, or sometimes flushed with water. But for most people, really leave the ears alone and you'll be fine. Q-tips can cause other problems, like they can scratch the ear canal and cause bleeding, or sometimes we even see people that push it in so far that they rupture their eardrum, meaning that they put a hole in their eardrum. And that's not a good thing because usually that hurts a lot, and then you can't hear very well for a little while until it heals. So, yeah, all in all, we always tell people, don't use Q-tips and don't stick anything in your ear that's smaller than your elbow.
Is listening to loud music bad for your hearing?
Yes, definitely. Listening to loud music can cause damage to your ears and cause you to lose your hearing over time. We know that listening to even moderately loud sounds, if you're exposed to them all day long, can cause hearing loss. Or sometimes really, really loud sounds can cause hearing loss in just a short amount of time. One sign that you may have caused some damage to your ears is if you get ringing in your ears, like some people do when they're, say, leaving a loud concert. So our best advice is keep the volume down when you're listening to music or other things on headphones or even on your TV. And if you are going to be exposed to loud noise, you're going to go somewhere with loud music, like a concert or a workplace with loud machines, things like that, then use some ear protection.
Wow, that was super! A big thanks to Ryan for answering the few questions for us. Learning about ears this week was so much fun. Before we go, we have a couple of people to thank.
Thank you to Cameron C. for being our newest Patreon supporter.
We truly appreciate all of the support we get from Cameron and our other Patreon supporters. Their support helps the podcast continue.
We also want to thank username Isaiah Bryant for the review.
The subject of the review is Fantastic Podcast, and his review says, "This podcast is awesome." The review is only 4 words long, but it helps us so much. Reviews mean so much to us, and they help us get noticed by new listeners. If you love podcasts, whether it's this one or any other, a 5-star review goes a long way. We read every one of our reviews, and we are touched by all of them, so thank you. Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's podcast, number 174, On Ears.
Great job, Olivia, and great job, Ash, for giving us an eerily good topic suggestion. Do you want to let us know what you're curious about? If so, send an email over to CuriousKidPodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to give us your name, age, and hometown so we can give you a shout out in an upcoming episode. Next week, we will get curious about superstitions for a listener from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. As always, thank you so much for listening and getting curious with us.